not a stranger to this topic. She did her master's degree. She did some work on this Hero genocide. He's a senior director of education and community affairs in the Holocaust. He has been engaged in Holocaust and genocide studies for 28 years. When she began her position in 2007, she curated the Center Holocaust Museum and continues to expand the exhibition through temporary exhibits such as the current exhibit created by her and her team on sexualized atrocities during genocide, which also features Ovaherero and Nama genocide. 2 weeks ago, Hilma Kapuka from the National Heritage Council of Namibia came here because she had read about the exhibit in the New York Times. And Ms. Kapuka, one from Namibia, is creating a traveling exhibit on the 1904. This is as a result of this work. This is what we talk about partnership. Beth supervises adult programming and creates tailored seminars for professionals in various fields, including law enforcement, homeland security agents, nurses, lawyers, physicians, university faculty, and active military personnel. So the center does this training, educational training about tolerance and hate. So it's a very beautiful place in what we do. So she has also presented on Ovaherero and the Nama genocide at many conferences in the United States, England, and Ireland, and the Netherlands. When Beth studying the history of Ovaherero and Nama people, she joined the African Studies Association. She's also a member of the International Association of Genocide Scholars and the National Women's Studies Association. So, without further ado, that's Beth.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay. When I saw this picture on the right-hand side are of Jewish child survivors. The picture was taken at Auschwitz when the Soviets liberated the camp. Survivors of Dr. Mengele's horrific experiments. And when I came across the picture of the children, survivors of the genocide, who are wearing prisoner ID tags around their neck, Ovaherero children, I noticed that the young boy on the right side and this young boy on the right side, they have the same face. The expression, the eyes, the mouth, it's the same face, and that was so chilling. And to me, this sums up everything about genocide, where you are imprisoning and torturing children. One of the more infamous genocide deniers of 1904 is, of course, Adolf Hitler. And in 1937, just 2 years before he launched the invasion of Poland, which would start World War I, he said, the German people once built up a colonial empire without robbing anyone and without war. Perfect example of denial. There are many links, as I mentioned earlier, between the two. In terms of people, Hermann Goering, who was in charge of military and economic spheres under the Nazis, his father held exactly the same position as the first governor in German Southwest Africa. Goering, as I believe Jefferson or Oscar mentioned, was conceived, or maybe he was upstairs, was conceived in German Southwest Africa, but he wasn't born there. But he absolutely idolized his father. And his father started to militarize him from a very young age. At the age of 3, he would dress little Herman up in uniforms, in military uniforms. And so this boy grew up, who became a very infamous Nazi, absolutely adoring everything to do with the military, hearing of these great exploits, quote, from his father's work in German Southwest Africa, and thinking that his father had the greatest job in the world. We'll get into it a little bit more. Dr. Eugen Fischer was an anatomist and anthropologist living in Germany, was heard about the kind of the open lands, the frontier lands sort of German Southwest Africa. decided that, hey, I can go there and make a name for myself, and he did. And his specialty was being one of the doctors at Shark Island, that has been mentioned. And Shark Island was really a death camp. It was designed to kill people. Everybody would have died there within 2 years because of starvation, the harsh elements. Nobody could have survived. And he would do experiments, racial experiments to prove, quote, German supremacy, white supremacy, mostly on corpses, mostly on victims. But there were other doctors there also, and some other camps, and sometimes the, quote, experiments, which were really torture, were done on live people. In terms of ideology and policy, the same idea about Lebensraum, living space, expansion, manifest destiny, all colonialism, all colonial ventures include this. That is what colonialism is. So this happened in colonial Africa, as well as under the Nazis, when they went and invaded country after country in Europe and stole the resources, exploited the people, took the wealth, everything that falls under colonialism. And then, of course, added that extra genocidal aspect. In terms of implementation, the legislation that occurred in colonial Germany, absolutely astounding. In the first 8 years or so of Nazism, there were over 400 anti-Jewish laws established to disenfranchise Jews, German blacks, and Roma and Sinti gypsies. Over 400 laws. In 1 year, there were over 800 laws in German Southwest Africa to do the same thing to the small group of people living in this area. Over 800 laws. Goering, we have a young picture of Herman, and then of course when he is a Nazi. But in terms of the appropriation, not only just taking of the cattle, once they robbed the people of cattle, because that was a core of the culture and of the way of life, it was a step towards ethnocide, the destruction of a culture. When they implemented laws of quelling the sacred fire was at the central to Ovaherero villages. And it was a conduit, a spiritual conduit to all of one's ancestors. So if you extinguish that fire, you are not only extinguishing a sacred flame that is never supposed to go out, but you are also severing your tie, a person's ties with all of their ancestors in the past, and then of course there won't be any in the future. So it was absolutely devastating in terms of a cultural damage. As has been mentioned, there was an absolutely abolishment of all types of civil rights, political rights, economic rights. The Ovaherero now were just completely disenfranchised in every aspect, and there was mass rape even before the genocide. There were laws against rape of indigenous women, and so it was pretty much at the German administration's convenience. And pretty much looked the other way. During the Nuremberg trials after the Holocaust in 1945, Goering said, "The position of my father as first governor of Southwest Africa is one of the points which are significant with relation to my later development." So he really consciously and makes that connection of influence from the colony. Obviously, and has been spoken about, the anti-miscegenation laws. Germans could not marry indigenous women. Same thing was happening in Nazi Germany, and until 1967, it was also here in the United States. What was different is that in the colonies, with this law, there developed a new word, a new term, Rassenschade, racial shaming. So that if you were in a quote, mixed relationship, that was something to be ashamed of as the white person. And that word Rassenschade then carried on into the Nazi era. When you have anti-miscegenation laws, when you are telling someone that a white person cannot marry a black person, that is a form of dehumanization against that person of color, or the Jew, or whatever it is. That they are not human, they are not good enough of the same level to marry. that's one of the steps towards dehumanization, and through dehumanization, the very end result is, of course, genocide. The laws also contained what would seem, they were just absolutely abhorrent in terms of the physical abuse. Even official papers talked about how a chief, an Ovaherero chief, was beaten so badly that he was flogged until the blood ran. And this was covered that the German overseer could do this under the law. One of the governors that was mentioned, that first Governor Lupine, racial hatred has become rooted in every framework of justice. It was institutionalized racism in every single aspect of the colony. You can see some of the numbers up there. And when there was an attempt at justice for a raped woman, it was just absolutely dismissed. Gang rape was so common that even there was a case of a Swiss newspaper publishing an article of an absolute atrocity and brutality against this young girl being raped by German soldiers, and the German administrator said, "Oh, it happens so often, what's the big deal?" We've heard about von Trotha, this really the leader of the genocide, even though he was getting his orders from Berlin, but was very much supportive of what he was doing. And one of his earlier statements, even before the quote extermination order, no war may be conducted humanely against non-humans. In his mind, and what he's teaching the soldiers, is that these people, the Ovaherero and Namibia people, are not even human. So basically, we don't have to worry about what kind of conduct we commit during war. What is also similar to the Holocaust is that the Germans saw this genocide in Southwest Africa as, quote, a racial war. This was racialized hatred to the point of genocide. Same ideology as in Nazi Germany. Jews were not a religion, they were a race. And then the next step was Jews weren't even a human race, they were lice. They were an insect. And the same mentality, the same propaganda, almost identically worded, existed in the colony. I think it's better that the nation perish rather than infect our troops and our water and food. Anti-Semitism is exactly the same thing as delousing. Getting rid of lice is not a question of ideology, it's a matter of cleanliness, and that was by Himmler. The wording is so similar. These people are insects, and they are going to contaminate and infect us, so we need to get rid of them. And this was a poster from Poland against Jews. In terms of implementation, the mobile killing units, same type of methodology, where the German troops in the colony was going after every single Ovaherero and Nama to annihilate them. And that totality of destruction, that totality, the genocide, is one of the similarities with Jewish victims during the Holocaust. And, calling the people beast. The quote from the Army report above, identical to what was happening with the German mobile killing units in Eastern Europe during the Holocaust. We've heard about the concentration camps. Now, there were other concentration camps. Germany did not invent concentration camps in the colonial region of Southwest Africa. Other countries, including the United States, had them late 1800s, early 1900s. What was unique to the German colony is that in the concentration camps, they added another element. In previous concentration camps that were termed concentration camps, they were really prisons. They were detaining areas for leaders of rebellions, for people they thought were going to revolt. And this was really just to contain them. The concentration camps in German Southwest Africa not only imprisoned people, but they exploited them for slave labor. And that's a huge difference. Huge difference from other colonial regions. And the same thing, of course, happened during the Holocaust. Very horrible, difficult pictures to look at. Fischer, With his research, quote, that he did in Southwest Africa, he originally went over there to look at the offspring of marriages, not rape, but marriages between Germans, other Europeans, and indigenous women, and basically to prove that the whites and the Europeans and the Germans were superior. He published his work. That he also included some other work from his book, research in Southwest Africa and on Shark Island with a couple of his buddies, and they put together a book. They published The Principles of Human Heredity. Now this book is really important. It's just all racist ideology. It's garbage. However, Adolf Hitler in 1924 was in the Landsberg prison for trying to overthrow the very government. The publisher of this book visited Hitler, gave him a copy. Hitler absolutely went crazy and fell in love with the writings. And pretty nearly, really plagiarized a lot, word for word sometimes, into Mein Kampf. Because of his success and his fame, Fischer was appointed the first director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Anthropology, Human Genetics, and Eugenics. Basically, under the Nazis, this became an institution that taught all SS physicians. And to make a long story short, Fischer's protege had a protege named Joseph Mengele. The institute received a huge grant from the government to study twins. And they really didn't want to leave Berlin. It was nice, and they thought, let's send one of our grad students, basically. So they sent Mengele to Auschwitz-Birkenau because it had an unlimited supply of subjects. There were constantly new people coming in, and literally millions to choose from. And so that's how we get Mengele in Auschwitz. Images from Shark Island, deported people, the horrific conditions, everything that you know about Nazi concentration camps, we see in the concentration camps and in Shark Island. The starvation, the beatings, the execution, the mass rape. You saw some of those pictures in Vapuka's presentation of the abuse and continued exploitation of girls and women. And also very similarly, near Auschwitz, because of course the Nazi guards needed R&R, they needed a break from their hard work, they had a place called Solahut, which was really just a nice place for them to go and have some of the female guards or secretaries go and make a party. Well, near Shark Island, or at Shark Island, for those guards, there was a delivery of 30,000 bottles of wine. It was the same type of mentality. You're going to work, you're killing, torturing, doing horrific atrocities, and then you need to go and have a glass of wine. The sadism of those kind of people, I don't think anybody in this room can identify with. These are some of the twins that Mengele experimented on. This happens to be a group of Roma and Sinti, Gypsy children. And Verschauer, who sent Mengele to Auschwitz, talks about how Mengele is sending back samples, eye samples, blood, bone, all sorts of human samples, just like Fischer did from Shark Island to Germany, Mengele is doing to universities and museums in Berlin. There were other, I just want to be respectful of the time, different German soldiers who were active not only in German Southwest Africa, but then later on became prominent Nazis. One of them is Franz Ritter von Epp, who spent 2 years murdering people in German Southwest Africa. Later on during the Nazi period, continued with his work and actually really strongly influenced Hitler and Rudolf Hess, ideologically and also with some of the practice of what they did in the colony. Epp was put in charge of Dachau and really was the leader in terms of murdering the Bavarian Jews and a great number of Roma and Sinti. Even after Germany was, they were expelled in terms of their authority in Southwest Africa when the British came in 1915. The Nazi Party from Germany was imported, with the Germans that still continue to live there, the perpetrators, the descendants who still live there. And so this was very prominent even as early as 1934. The German colony is very proud to have a very strong Nazi party in former German Southwest Africa. And the German Empire and the Nazi Party are one today. And the German school at Windhoek is above all a German affair, not a South African. So they're teaching a new generation of Nazis by former perpetrators of the colonial 1904 genocide. This comes from the Nazi Handbook for Hitler Youth, and it makes mention of the colonial, quote, what they call a war. It was really genocide. At the end of '06, peace was reestablished, but they're talking about the derogatory term Hottentots actually is referring to Nama people. But even for Hitler Youth, they are giving them a lesson in a revision of the truth. And in the program, kind of superimposed on the Namibian flag is a quote from Dr. Theo Gerrab. And at some point, just take a look and read it, because he's really making the connection that if only we had stopped the genocide in German Southwest Africa, that would have prevented the Holocaust, might have prevented maybe the Armenian genocide if we had set a precedent at that time, and then of course future genocide. So really, isn't it time to set a precedent?